Hi, my name is Sarathi, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate which ODBC administrator to use to create the DSNs, the data source names, to import sources or targets into Designer from relational sources. Now, why does this question arise on which ODBC administrator to use on a Windows machine when we are trying to import sources or targets into Designer? This is because, say, the Windows systems are 32-bit or 64-bit. So the Windows machine on which you install the Power Center clients can be a 32-bit machine or a 64-bit machine. But remember, Power Center clients are always 32-bit, which means you can install a Power Center client on a 32-bit machine or a 64-bit machine, but Power Center client is always 32-bit. So the Power Center client looks for a 32-bit ODBC administrator. So the Power Center client is 32-bit, and hence it looks for the DSNs created in the 32-bit ODBC administrator, either in a 32-bit Windows machine or a 64-bit Windows machine. So on a 32-bit Windows machine we have one ODBC administrator which is 32-bit, but on a 64-bit Windows machine we have two ODBC administrators, one 32-bit and one is a 64-bit. So let's see how to launch the 32-bit ODBC administrator on the 64-bit machine and configure DSN so that they can be used inside the 32-bit clients. Now, if you see the Designer, when I try to import sources, import from database, here it shows me a ODBC data source, and when I click configure here, it shows me the DSNs, right? So these are all the DSNs that are configured under the 32-bit ODBC administrator on a 64-bit machine. So how do you determine if your machine is 64-bit? So right click on my computer, properties. If you see here, you will be shown that it is a 64-bit operating system. So this is a 64-bit machine on which there is a 64-bit operating system, but my client, Power Center client, is always 32-bit. Now when I click ODBC administrator here, it always shows me a 32-bit ODBC administrator. Now you could always configure, so there is something called as a user DSN and a system DSN. Now you can configure a user DSN which will be visible in Power Center clients, and you can also configure a system DSN which will be visible in Power Center clients. Both are visible, but what is the difference? Now let's say on this Windows machine you've logged in as user A and created a user DSN. So this user DSN will be visible when you are launching the Power Center client by logging in as the Windows user A. Now let's say you have another Windows user B which is configured on the same machine. Now you have logged in as Windows user B, then you would not have access to this DSN, whatever is created under user DSN, because the Windows user that has created a DSN under user DSN only will have access. He is the owner of this DSN, and other users will not see this DSN. But if you create a system DSN, any user logging into this Windows machine can see all the DSNs created, and hence all the DSNs will be visible as any user in the Power Center client machines. So it is suggested to create a system DSN, but if you are using a single Windows user, then you can always create a user DSN. The user DSN would also be visible in the Power Center clients. Now here, when you click on the ODBC data source and when you click here, it opens the ODBC administrator, and you can always configure the DSNs here, add DSNs here. But if you want to launch the ODBC administrator from the Windows machine directly instead of clicking here and launching it, then on a Windows 64-bit machine you will have C, then Windows, and under Windows you would have two folders, System32 and syswow64. So syswow means Windows on Windows 64. So System32 means this is the folder that contains the ODBC administrator, ODBC AD.32. Also, although it says System32 ODBC AD32 on a Windows 64-bit machine, this is a 64-bit ODBC administrator. So whatever you configure here will not be visible in the Power Center clients, because the Power Center is a 32-bit client, right? So there is another folder called syswow64, that is Windows on Windows 64, which means Windows 32 on Windows 64. So here there is something called odbc83.2.exe. So this is a 32-bit ODBC administrator. So do not go by the names. In system 32 on a 64-bit machine, it is a 64-bit ODBC administrator, and on a 64-bit machine syswow64, which means Windows on Windows 64, contains the 32-bit ODBC administrator. Now in a 32-bit machine there is only one ODBC administrator inside system 32, which is a 32-bit ODBC administrator. So there is no confusion on a 32-bit machine, but on a 64 machine, because you have both the ODBC administrators, there is a confusion on where to create the DSNs. So because Power Center clients are always 32-bit, you can go to syswow64, launch this odbc83.2.exe and configure your user DSNs or system DSNs here if you want to configure from here. Or just as shown before, you can, in the sources or targets, you can click on the ODBC administrator inside the Power Center designer, and it will automatically launch the 32-bit designer that it is looking for. So in this video we have seen and we have learned why to make a choice on which ODBC administrator to use when you're importing sources or targets in the designer, and how to determine the bit mode of Power Center designer, which is always 32-bit. So the Power Center clients are always 32-bit on Windows machine, and which ODBC administrator, there is 64-bit and there is a 32-bit administrator, so which one to use in importing sources and targets. So we love to hear from you, and you can always write to us on supportvideos@informatica.com, or you could follow us on Twitter account InfoSupport. Thank you.